Stand ready for my arrival, worm.
You don't understand. The only thing I want to do right now is hit something as hard as I can.
Welcome back to another thrilling episode of Invincible Comics, where we delve into the epic clashes between some of the most powerful beings in existence. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the explosive battle between two unstoppable forces, Conquest and Invincible. Conquest, the notorious Viltrumite warrior, has arrived on Earth with one goal: establish his dominance and crush anyone who dares to oppose him. Standing in his way is Invincible, our hero, who is willing to risk everything to defend his home and its people. This fight will test their strength, speed, and strategy to the limit. Who will emerge victorious? Can Invincible overcome this formidable enemy? Or will Conquest prove to be unbeatable? Get ready for an intense showdown that you won't want to miss. Be sure to like and subscribe for more exhilarating content from the Invincible Comics universe. Following the catastrophic Invincible War, where alternate versions of Mark Grayson nearly annihilated the planet, Mark finds himself overwhelmed by guilt and exhaustion as he aids in the massive recovery effort. Just as he struggles to process the devastation, an elder Viltrumite named Conquest suddenly appears, confronting him about his duty to the Viltrumite Empire. Conquest warns Mark that if he refuses to assist in the conquest of Earth, he will be replaced and eliminated. Mark, already worn down, tells him this isn't the time, but Conquest reveals that he was sent precisely because the Empire knew he would resist. As the two warriors collide with incredible force, creating a massive shockwave, Conquest swiftly overpowers Mark, driving him through a building. Mocking Mark, Conquest echoes the words of Anissa, the Viltrumite who previously tried to persuade him to surrender Earth. However, he admits that he isn't particularly concerned with the Viltrumite mission. He simply relishes the challenge of fighting someone as powerful as Mark. Fueled by rage and frustration, Mark strikes back, but Conquest remains unfazed, smirking at his defiance. Undeterred, Mark launches himself at his foe, sending Conquest crashing through another building. As the brutal battle escalates, Mark finally lands a blow powerful enough to knock Conquest into orbit. But before he can capitalize on the moment, Conquest retaliates, sending Mark hurtling toward the stratosphere. Mark struggles to break free, but Conquest quickly puts an end to the struggle with a devastating punch, shattering one of his monocles. As Mark plummets back to Earth, Conquest follows, pummeling him relentlessly. Mark clutches his injured eye, pain searing through him. Meanwhile, across town, Debbie and her boyfriend Paul watch in horror as the battle is broadcasted on the news. Mark's half-brother Oliver rushes to his aid, but the combatants move too fast for him to reach them. Despite Mark's desperate attempts to reason with Conquest, the villain refuses to yield, reveling in the violence. Just as it seems Mark is doomed, Oliver launches a surprise attack, momentarily distracting Conquest. Seeing an opportunity to protect his younger brother, Mark pushes Oliver out of harm's way. But Conquest quickly recovers and drives his elbow into Mark's neck, slamming him to the ground. In a last-ditch effort, Mark headbutts him, which only amuses the Viltrumite. Catching Mark's next punch, Conquest smirks, telling him that if this is all he has to offer, his death is inevitable. Meanwhile, beneath the Pentagon, Cecil scrambles to see if D.A. Sinclair has successfully reanimated the 4 alternate versions of Mark as Reaniman. However, Sinclair informs him that their dense Viltrumite physiology prevents him from making the necessary modifications. Realizing the dire situation, Cecil watches in dread, knowing the fate of the world rests on Mark's shoulders. "Then God help us all," he mutters gravely. Elsewhere, Adam and Betsy Wilkins are glued to the television, watching the battle unfold in shock. The media has mistakenly identified Conquest as Omni-Man, and the world watches in disbelief as Invincible is brutally beaten. Their shock turns to utter astonishment when Eve, who has been in a coma for 2 days, suddenly wakes up and sees the carnage playing out on screen. Overcome with urgency, She inadvertently exposes Mark's secret identity while demanding that the doctors contact Cecil and arrange transport to the battlefield. Meanwhile, Conquest continues to mercilessly toss Mark around, revealing that he had encountered Nolan in his youth, proving he is far older than he appears. Just when all hope seems lost, Oliver reappears, catching Conquest off guard and helping Mark to his feet. Using Conquest's age against him, Oliver argues that they can win, but Conquest is far from finished. In a devastating display of power, he punches Oliver with such force that the younger fighter loses multiple teeth and has his arms shattered. With cruel delight, Conquest attempts to tear Oliver apart, but Mark intervenes just in time. As the battle rages on, Cecil's medics arrive to retrieve Oliver, rushing him to the hospital. Debbie watches in anguish, terrified for Oliver's safety, while Paul does his best to reassure her. William, Rick, Amber, Bennett, Guerrieri, and Art remain frozen in fear, unable to do anything as Mark struggles against Conquest's overwhelming strength. The fight reaches new heights of brutality as Mark lands a powerful blow, only for Conquest to quickly recover and send him crashing into a warship. Mark struggles to his feet just as Eve arrives, determined to aid him. However, her presence only heightens Mark's anxiety. He knows Conquest is not to be underestimated. Seizing the opportunity, Conquest unleashes his fury, breaking Mark's leg and impaling Eve. Cradling a dying Eve in his arms, Mark is overcome with grief and rage. But even in his darkest moment, he refuses to surrender. With unwavering resolve, he vows that Conquest will not leave this battle alive. Conquest, however, sees Mark's compassion as a weakness, savoring every moment of their fight. Mark knows he is outmatched in raw power and speed, but his determination to protect those he loves pushes him forward. The battle reaches its climax. Mark shatters his own forearm in an exchange of blows, while Conquest's cybernetic arm is completely destroyed. Just when all seems lost, Eve's body miraculously regenerates, awakening stronger than ever. She unleashes a devastating energy blast, burning much of Conquest's skin. Mark seizes the moment, launching a relentless assault. With his body barely holding together, Conquest makes one final lunge at Eve, intent on finishing her. But Mark refuses to let him succeed. The three warriors continue their vicious struggle, each second more intense than the last. As the fate of the world hangs in the balance, lying on the ground, Mark writhes in agony as Conquest looms over him, prepared to strike the final blow. But in a final surge of adrenaline-fueled fury, Mark headbutts Conquest with enough force to distort his face. As Conquest momentarily reels, Mark crawls toward Eve, who lies unconscious and exposed. Holding her close, he tearfully confesses his love for her, fearing she may be lost forever. Before despair can fully take hold, a group of heroes from various comic universes arrive, whisking them away to safety. Days later, Mark awakens in a hospital, his body battered and broken. Eve sits beside him, relieved to see him awake. In their emotional reunion, Eve reveals that her abilities can override the mental blocks implanted by the government, but only when she endures extreme trauma. The revelation shakes Mark as he realizes the heavy burden she has carried alone. He vows to stand by her side, no matter the challenges ahead. Their conversation is interrupted by a knock at the door. Debbie and Paul enter, distraught. Debbie breaks down, begging Mark to give up being a superhero. Paul reassures him that they'll handle things. After they leave, Cecil arrives, solemnly revealing that Conquest is dead. Mark stares in shock, struggling to process the reality that he took a life. Though it was in self-defense, guilt consumes him. As days pass, Mark's physical wounds begin to heal, but his psyche is fractured. He grows distant, his moral compass forever altered. He realizes that from now on, he can't afford hesitation. If necessary, he will kill his enemies. In that moment, he knows he is no longer the same person he once was.